It's getting closer to springtime, and that means a lot of you are going to be getting into motorcycles. So I'm going to be going over 6 tips for the beginner motorcycle rider starting on a brand new motorcycle. I'm hoping you got full protective gear for your body and you have motorcycle insurance for those catastrophic events. But what I recommend is to have full gear for your bike itself. Right here we have engine crash guards for the Rebel 500. But on your bike, it might be a little different. You might have frame sliders, you might have bendable levers that will fold up in the event of a tip over. Check out what you can put on your bike to make sure that it is protected just like how you're protected with full gear. A good rule of thumb is just to follow the recommendations in the owner's manual and to not ride the motorcycle like you stole it within the first 1,000 miles.
One thing you're gonna do when you have the engine on is you don't want to be revving the engine unless it's under a load. So me riding right here, going on the street, it's actually under a load. It's putting power to that rear wheel is pushing the bike. That is under load. When it's not under load, that means you're in neutral, you're stopped, and you're just rev bombing it, okay? You don't wanna be doing that to a brand new engine, and you don't wanna be doing that to any engine really. Now that you're out riding, what you want to do is avoid the freeway, okay? You don't want to be on the freeway because that's going to be that consistent speed, 65, 75, whatever it is. What you want to do during your first 500 to 1,000 miles is you want to be varying those speeds, varying those gears, varying those throttle positions, the RPM ranges, to allow the motorcycle to really get broken into.
Now what we have to be doing is warming up our tires and then breaking them in. When you first get a brand new tire, it's obviously going to be cold because you haven't ridden on it, and it's also going to be smooth. So in order to make sure that it's not smooth, we need to be riding around. The asphalt itself is going to act like sandpaper and create ridges in the rubber. Now, in order for it to create ridges in the rubber so that it can grab the ground is that they have to be warm. So warm equals malleability, and then cold is not good.
So we got new tires because we have a new bike, or we just put new tires on our used bike that we just bought. So what we have to do is actually scrub them in basically. And the best thing to do is find a twisty road. It's gonna go ahead and scrape and scrub in some nice abrasions to the tire to allow it to have that mechanical grip. Hopefully it took you about 10 to 15 minutes to get to a road that's a little bit twisty, a little bit more fun, because you need to have your tires warmed up. So within the first 10 to 15 minutes of riding, your tires are cold. And think of like trying to eat a frozen steak. It doesn't work very well. Now, if you heat it up and it's nice and malleable, it's easy to digest, easy to chew. It's much like your tires. If they're super cold, they're gonna be pretty rigid when it comes to having to grab that ground for that mechanical traction. So what you're gonna want to do is warm them up. So it takes about 10-15 minutes of riding nice and easy to do that. So within those first 10 to 15 minutes, please, please, please be nice and easy and only do any type of jerky movements if it is an emergency.
So just like breaking in our tires to make sure that they're running optimally, there's a specific way of doing that with your brakes. Now it's called bedding the brakes. And what we're trying to do here is get the rotor to match up specifically to our brake pads. And there is a way of doing that, but the main thing is don't worry about it, just ride normal like you typically would. But if you want to do it the right way, let's go ahead and go over that. If you want to follow a procedure, this is from EBC Brakes. Now this is straight for them. The best procedure is to drive gently, avoiding harsh braking unless in an emergency for the first 100 miles. In the second 100 miles, up to 200, you can use gently increasing brake pressures when using the brakes. Only after 200 miles of urban driving, not 200 miles on a motorway or freeway where brakes are used less, you should attempt to apply heavy load and heat the brakes. To do this final bedding, slow from 60 miles per hour to 10 miles per hour 5 times in a row. Then drive slowly for a few minutes if safe to do so to allow the brakes to cool. Try to avoid coming to a rest while the brakes are still heated. If you are serious about this, you will get training. I will always recommend the MSF Basic Rider course as a good starting point.
Within the first 1,000 miles, try your best to make it to the parking lot at least 5 times. This is where you're gonna be practicing your U-turns, swerves, figure eights, and your braking so that you're not having to do that out on the main road with all those extra hazards. And plus, it's really fun. If you want to continue practicing your skills but not in a parking lot, I highly recommend checking out some side streets. This way you can practice your situational awareness with traffic, but it's going to be at a much lower speed. Another thing you could be doing is going into neighborhoods. Now, neighborhoods typically have really big streets, and there's also going to be a lot of cars and a lot of little mini intersections like these driveways. That is going to allow you to practice your situational awareness once again at a lower speed. And then on top of it, you're going to find some cul-de-sacs or some areas where you're going to be able to practice your U-turns and figure eights. So I highly recommend practicing within a neighborhood.
Start a habit of checking your tire pressure weekly. Every 200 miles, do a hands-on T-clocks. If you don't know what the T-clocks means, I will have that resource in the description. It's provided by the Motorcycle Safety Foundation. This will get you familiar with what looks normal on the motorcycle. If you know what is normal, you'll know what is abnormal, and then you can fix it.
We briefly talked about the break-in procedure, but once you reach that recommended mileage, it's time to take your bike in for its first service.
There's typically 3 types of maintenance. The first one is going to be that break-in service maintenance where it's usually done around 500 miles. And the second one is going to be that periodic maintenance where you're checking your tires, you're lubing and cleaning your chain, and doing little things like that every so often.
Out of all the maintenance requirements, major maintenance is one of the biggest things. So changing the tires is going to be one of those things where you're going to have special tools, you're going to have the balancing tools, you're going to have the lift to lift the bike up, you're going to have all these different things, and that's considered major maintenance, and that is something that I personally choose to have done at the dealership. It's just way too much, and I don't want to mess it up.
Many people choose to do the work themselves on their motorcycles. I will always recommend, especially for a beginner, to go ahead and get it done by the professionals at a dealership or somebody that knows what they're doing. But if you do want to work on it yourself, I highly recommend getting a service manual. I printed mine out, got it nice and labeled for the Rebel, and I got one for the FTR. Highly recommend it. They're gonna have all the specs that you need, like torque specs and when and how to do certain things.
If you have any more questions about where to get gear, how to get gear, what type of stuff you should be looking for, check out the Motorcycle Beginner's Guide. I have a great guide for you, and it's discounted right now. With that said, I hope you guys ride safe, be safe, and I'll be seeing you around.